Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are continuing with Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 13. And we are going to start with verse number 18. ज्योतिषामपि तज्ज्योतिस्तमसः परम् उच्यते ज्ञानं ज्ञेयं ज्ञानगम्यं हृदि सर्वस्य विष्ठितम्. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and He is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. Would someone like to read the purport? Okay, go ahead,
Sure.
Amala. Oh, okay.
Michael, you're reading? Or?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you, Amalan. You can go ahead.
Sure. The super soul, the supreme personality of Godhead, is the source of light in all luminous objects like the sun, moon, and stars. In the Vedic literature, we find that in the spiritual kingdom, there is no need of sun or moon because the effulgence of the Supreme Lord is there. In the material world, that Brahma Jyoti, the Lord's spiritual effulgence, is covered by the Mahat Tattva, the material elements. Therefore, in this material world, we require the assistance of sun, moon, electricity, etc. for light. But in the spiritual world, there is no need of such things. It is clearly stated in the Vedic literature that because of his luminous effulgence, everything is illuminated. It is clear, therefore, that his situation is not in the material world. He is situated in the spiritual world, which is far, far away in the spiritual sky. That is also confirmed in the Vedic literature. Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parasta. He is just like the sun, eternally luminous, but he is far, far beyond the darkness of the material world. His knowledge is transcendental. The Vedic literature confirms that Brahman is concentrated transcendental knowledge. To one who is anxious to be transferred to that spiritual world, knowledge is given by the Supreme Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart. One Vedic mantra says, Tam ha devam atma buddhi prakasham mumuksur vai saranam aham prapadye. One must surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead if he at all wants liberation. As far as the goal of ultimate knowledge is concerned, it is also confirmed in Vedic literature. Tam eva viditvati mrityum eti. Only by knowing him can one surpass the boundary of birth and death. He is situated in everyone's heart as the supreme controller. The Supreme has legs and hands distributed everywhere, and this cannot be said of the individual soul. Therefore, that there are two knowers of the field of activity, the individual soul and the supersoul, must be admitted. One's hands and legs are distributed locally, but Krishna's hands and legs are distributed everywhere. This is confirmed in the Svetasvatara Upanishad. Sarvasya Prabhum Ishanam Sarvasya Saranam Rahat. That supreme personality of Godhead, Super Soul, is the Prabhu or Master of all living entities. Therefore, he is ultimate shelter of all living entities. So there is no denying the fact that the supreme super soul and the individual soul are always different.
Thank you. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshum Amlitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Welcome to all of you for this Bhagavad Gita class. So we can see that the glories of the super soul are continuing. We have been hearing about the super soul, Krishna situated in everyone's heart as the super soul. You know, we learned about his qualities, about his supremacy. And here we can see Krishna is continuing his instructions to Arjuna, and he's saying that he is the source of light beyond darkness, and he's unmanifested, and also he's knowledge, he's object, and he's the goal of knowledge. Now, when we go to chapter number 15, we will, in the verse number 15 of chapter 15, we will see that Krishna is going to tell Arjuna that sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishto matah smriti jnanam apohanam cha vedescha sarver aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. What does that mean? It means Krishna is telling Arjuna that I am situated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. And he says, I am the compiler of the Vedas, and I am to be known from the Vedas. So that is the goal of all the Vedas. The summary of the Vedas is Srimad Bhagavatam. And here we have the summary of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the Bhagavad Gita. And the purpose of understanding Bhagavad Gita is to understand Krishna. We've already learned in all these chapters, right from chapter 2 onwards, where we heard Krishna is explaining to Arjuna who Arjuna is, that he is the spirit soul and he's not the body, and who is Krishna, that he is the supreme personality of Godhead. So here, Krishna is saying, I'm situated in everyone's heart. He is there in the heart so that he can guide us. But we have to take that first step. If we have the desire to understand him, if we have the desire to understand the Bhagavad Gita, then Krishna, who's situated in the heart, he's going to help and guide. Herein, he says, he tells Arjuna, he's talking about his supremacy so that Arjuna, not only Arjuna, but we can also understand who God really is. What does he say? He says, he's a source of light in the sun and the moon and the stars. And in the spiritual world, there is no need for moon and sun and stars. Why? Because the whole spiritual world lights up with the Brahma Jyoti, with the effulgence coming out from the body of Krishna. That is how it is. There's no need for sun, moon, or stars. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, in one verse, Krishna tells Arjuna that his dham, his abode, is called Chintamani Dham. Here in the material world, Krishna's effulgence is actually covered up. If you remember reading Srila Prabhupada's purport, in that he says that in this material world, Krishna's uh, effulgence is covered up, right? That is the reason here in this material world we need the sun and the moon and the stars, right? So we, from this verse also we can understand that Krishna is in the spiritual world. He is the supreme personality of Godhead, and the spiritual world is far, far, far away, very far away. Now in this verse also Krishna says that he is knowledge, and this knowledge is talking about transcendental knowledge. And only if a person is sincere and serious, only then that person can understand what Krishna is trying to say. Now Bhagavad Gita, many people, they just pick up the book and they read and they expect to understand it. No, it doesn't work like that. Bhagavad Gita is a science of self-realization. It makes us understand who we really are. It makes us understand who Krishna is and our relationship with him, and what is our prescribed duty. What are we supposed to do now that we have this human form of life? Is it just to eat, sleep, and be merry? No. It's human life is way much more than that, way much more than just eating, sleeping, mating, defending. No, we have the philosophical intelligence so we can take on the knowledge, take on this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita and understand who we really are, what are we doing here in this material world, and where do we go from here. We need to have a goal in life. And here Krishna is talking about that goal, which is the spiritual world. Why the spiritual world? Because we are spiritual beings. We belong in the spiritual world. We do not belong here in this material world at all. Here we are suffering the seven miseries of life. And here Krishna is saying, I'm there in the heart and I can guide you. If we want the guidance, He's there to give us that guidance. But we are the ones who have to take the first step, right? Only sincere souls can understand what Krishna is trying to say. Only they can qualify themselves and be able to enter into the spiritual world. Just like, going to any country, we need a visa stamped over there. We cannot, on the pass, but we cannot just walk into any place. No, there are some requirements. Similarly, there are requirements for the entry into the spiritual world. So here Krishna says that I am there, situated in everyone's heart. Yeah? He is ready to guide us. Are we ready to take that guidance? Unfortunately, most people here in this material world, they think they know it all. They know everything and they don't need any help or guidance. But we have tried and tried and tried. In this material world, Krishna says it's dukhalayam ashashvatam. It is full of miseries and it is temporary. So to understand Him, that is why we are meeting every Wednesday and trying to learn the Bhagavad Gita, to try and understand, what is our situation, why are we here, and to understand how we can break the cycle of birth and death. Now, to understand the Bhagavad Gita, we obviously need basic faith. We all have basic faith. That is why we are present here today on Zoom, and that is why we are hearing the words of the Supreme Lord. And the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is, first of all, to understand. So, as I have mentioned, there are 5 subject matters of the Bhagavad Gita: who is God, who are we, the spirit soul, material nature, karma, and eternal time. These are the 5 subject matters that are spoken about in the Bhagavad Gita. This is a conversation between Krishna and his best friend Arjuna, his close friend Arjuna. So, from the Bhagavad Gita, so far we have heard from the beginning up until this chapter 13, where we see that Krishna is very clearly explaining to us that He's the controller, He's the guide, He's the well-wisher, He is the witness in the heart, and He's also the sanctioner. So only when we will, just like Krishna tells Arjuna, Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvata tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti. So Arjuna, Krishna says, anyone who can understand the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities, that person will not take on another birth after giving up this body. So that means that person will be eligible to go back to the spiritual world. So, how can we understand this? It is not easy to understand Krishna's appearance and his activities, right? And also, we need to understand that He is the master of all living entities and He is the ultimate shelter. Now, this is what we understood from this verse and the purport. Let's see what does verse number 19 say. Thus, the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. Very, very clearly, Krishna is saying, only my devotees can understand this. And once they understand this, understand what? What does he say? If they can understand this body, We have already heard from the beginning of this chapter where Arjuna put questions to Krishna, what is the field of activities, who is the knower of the field, and, who is to be known, etc. So we understood, Krishna responded to his question by saying that this body is a field of activities, and the soul, which is within the body, is the knower of the field of activities. That means the soul is a knower of this body. But we need to understand there's a difference. So the soul is knower of its own body, whereas the super soul, which is Krishna present in everyone's heart, is the knower of all the bodies. He knows what's going on in all the bodies of all living entities. That is the difference. So here he's saying that if only my devotees can understand this body, the field of activities, knowledge, and the noble have been. See, I have already described all this to you already. This is what he's telling Arjuna, that I have already explained this to you. So once a person is, the devotee is able to understand the difference between body and the soul, and the difference between the soul and the super soul, then what will be the result? Krishna says, such devotee will attain to my nature. Then that person will become qualified, right? Will become eligible to enter into the spiritual world. Now, Krishna is already from the beginning of this chapter described the body, the soul, the super soul, what is knowledge, to understand how to understand the knower of this body, which is the soul, and who is the knowable. Krishna is knowable. So the whole process of knowing, you see, that is the science of knowledge, the whole process of understanding all this. It, theoretically, it's very easy to understand. I'm not this body, I'm just a soul. Yes, that's just theory. But to put it into practice, right? To really realize that, to come to the stage of self realization, one needs to follow the process. Just like for, learning anything, in this material life, whether it is Java, SAP, music, karate, dancing, take any activity. There is a process to learn it, right? It's not just, that we can randomly do this, that, and then be able to learn. No. When we, for instance, if say I want to learn karate, I join a, a class, where there is a certified teacher who has already got the certification plus experience and knows, and also is bona fide certified. So then when we go to that class, karate class, we need to follow the process. We cannot tell the karate teacher, I want to start with black belt. No, it doesn't work that way. That student has to follow the process that is required. So also over here, for self-realization, we need to follow a process that is being given by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. You see, that is what. So to understand all this, what is the process Krishna is talking about? Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dhrida vritaha. He says, always chanting my glories, and there has to be some determination in that, right? So to go on the spiritual path means we need to follow the directions, the instructions as it is. And the very first instruction is that first of all, we have to hear Shravanam, then kirtanam, then chanting, then smaranam, then remembrance is going to come. So first we hear what is Krishna talking about in the Bhagavad Gita. Once we hear, we contemplate on it. If we have any questions, we get them clarified, remove the doubts, and then follow the process. If Krishna says, do a karma, which means you follow the scriptures, you do your duty, prescribed duty, and you do not get attached to the results of your activities. And what will be the result of that? When we follow this process of akarma, then there will be no reactions. So if there will be no reactions, then there will be no more birth, right? The problem is that we have been coming back into this material over and over and over again. Birth, disease, old age, death, birth, disease, old age, death. So this cycle is going on perpetually. We need to break this cycle. So now that we have the intelligence, we can break this cycle. So in the verse, in the purport also, Srila Prabhupada says that until and unless we come to a stage of unalloyed devotional service. Alloy means mixed, mixture. Unalloyed means it's totally pure. There is no mixture of anything at all. There's no mixture of karma or jnana or anything. It is just pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, it's impossible. It's impossible. The knowledge, when we put it into practice, that will bring us to an understanding. You see, that understanding which is very, very important. Right now, we are conditioned right from birth that this material world is for enjoyment. We need to enjoy. No one is stopping us from enjoying, but at the same time, we should also understand that we cannot live like animals. What do the animals do? They eat, we eat. They sleep, we sleep. They have babies, we have babies. They defend themselves, we defend ourselves. So if we are not doing anything beyond that, then what is the difference between them and us? There's not much difference at all. So we, being fortunate to have this rare human form of life, we need to make good use of it. We need to take advantage of this human form of life and solve the problems that we have over here. And the only solution is given in the Bhagavad Gita. So right now we are in material consciousness, right? All the time we are just thinking about this body, how to please this body, how to make this body happy, how to make the family happy, how to make the country happy. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that we need to change the focus. We need to change our consciousness. We need to remove the conditioning and get some purification. So if somehow or the other we can dovetail our activities in the service of the Supreme Lord, then what will happen? Gradually, we will become self realized, and knowledge will lead us to perform perfect devotional service. Right now, so of course in this chapter we've already learned that the material elements when put together they form this body, right? And this body is called the field of activities. And to understand, the field of activities, the knower, which is the soul, and the super soul, we've learned all that. We've learned in this chapter also about super soul. What are his qualities? What is he? Everything we learned. Now we need to realize this through unalloyed devotional service. Just knowledge is not enough. That's not good enough. Like people say, doing good is good enough. No, that's not good enough. We have to go beyond that. So we need to put this knowledge into practice. Let's see the next verse. What does Krishna say? Verse number 20. He says material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. You see, this is important to understand that first of all, we need to understand I am not this body, I am the spirit soul which is situated in the heart. And second thing to understand is that I am eternal and I'm beginningless, which means there is no beginning for the soul and there is no end for the soul, right? See, let's give you an example. Supposing right now, I die and my body is lying on the ground, and my husband is saying, oh, Gita is gone, she's gone. But my body is still right there. Why is he saying she is gone? Because even though we may not know Bhagavad Gita, even though we may not be conscious of Krishna, but still something tells us that there is something different than this body that I have been calling Gita. So she is still there, her body is still there, but still we say she is gone, which means there was something within that body which is gone, and that is why that body is now dead and it's not moving at all. It's unmoving, right? So we need to understand that we are not this body, we are that soul which is within that body, and we are eternal. So here again in this verse number 20, Krishna is explaining that there is a difference between soul and super soul. Soul, that is us. Super soul is Paramatma, that is the Supreme Lord Krishna who is situated in the heart. Now, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the soul is in the category of Krishna's energy, whereas the super soul is a personal expansion of Krishna. There's a huge difference, right? So this verse also confirms that the living entities and material nature, they are both eternal. Both are Krishna's energies, but the living entities are of superior energy. Now, the summary of the Vedas is Srimad Bhagavatam, and in Srimad Bhagavatam, there is nice explanation where the information knowledge is given that the material nature it manifests from the body of Mahavishnu, right? So Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he expands himself, and again he expands, and then he expands as Mahavishnu. So this material nature manifests from Mahavishnu, and Prabhupada in his purport explains that we living entities, we are conditioned. That is why we do not want to serve him. Now if supposing, one person tells another person, serve me, the other person will say, why should I serve you? I'm a master, I'm not your servant that I'm going to serve you. But we forget, Jivera Swarup Hoy, Krishnera Nityadas. The eternal position of, constitutional position of Jiva, of the soul, is to be the Nitya, eternal servant of Krishna. Jivera Swarup Hoy, Krishnera Nitya Das. Das means servant. Nitya means eternal. So we are eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. And if we do not want to serve him, then we cannot enter the spiritual world, right? We need to qualify to go there, just like to go to another country, we need a visa stamped. Similarly, we need to qualify to go back to the spiritual world. Why is this material world here, in this creation? Why is there material world? Why isn't there just the spiritual world and all souls happy in the spiritual world? It's because there are some of us who need rectification, right? We this material world is a place to rectify ourselves. This is another opportunity given to us so that we can qualify to go back to the spiritual world. Krishna has already told Arjuna, mamai vamsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. Sanatana means eternal. We are amshas, we are parts of Krishna, we are eternal, and we are meant to serve him, right? But because of a rebellious nature, you can say, or because of conditioning or envy, we have come in contact with this material nature, and so we are conditioned. This material world, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, it's a prison house. We are in a prison house, but we feel we are free, we can do whatever we want. But this is a prison house, and here we are suffering. We want to be free. How do we become free? By following the process. This is so. If we continue, Prabhupada says in the purport that if we continue to stay attracted here, then there's going to be a hard struggle for existence. So it's important to understand that there are going to be transformations, like we have seen, like even in the verse and in the Prabhupada also explains that it's important to understand that all transformations and influences of material nature by the three modes, which is goodness, passion, and ignorance, they are products of material nature. Transformations are taking place, right? We have seen it in our own lives. We were born, we were little babies, then we started growing, and then we grew more, and then we had byproducts, which means some of us had children, and then there is dwindling, like myself, growing old, dwindling, and then finally there's going to be death. So these transformations are taking place in the body anyway, right? So these transformations are due to our body, not the soul. The soul doesn't get affected by all these transformations at all, doesn't get affected at all. So we need to understand that Bhagavad Gita is considered to be a science of self-realization, to realize ourselves, to understand that we are not this body, we are spirit souls. Our eternal home is the spiritual world, but we have just fallen here in this material world. We are struggling very hard. Every day is a struggle now. For instance, this year has been full of struggles for most of us, right? Like there is because of COVID-19, so many months and months and months we have been suffering. In what way are we suffering? We are not free at all. We cannot go freely anywhere. We cannot do the things we used to do before. We cannot have gatherings. For instance, even our Bhagavad Gita class, we cannot meet in person. We are at the mercy of Mr. Zoom, and that is how we are, conducting our what you call the Bhagavad Gita class. So we need to understand that yes, this is a place of suffering, but Bhagavad Gita is giving us an opportunity to break this cycle of birth and death. Somehow or the other, come out of it. Just like we can take an example of a fish. What is the constitutional position of a fish? To be in the water. That is the place. That is where the fish is going to be happy. We take the fish out, goldfish, give the fish $1 million home, maybe a Ferrari, maybe nice food to eat. Is the fish going to be happy? No, because the fish is out of its constitutional position. The fish will be happy only when we put the fish back into the water. That is our situation. We are like the fish out of the water. We belong to the spiritual world, but right now we are in the material world, and nothing seems to make us happy. We are trying different things. We are trying to, maybe let me try to eat this, maybe let me try to go. I remember when I went to New York, uh, I think it was 2 years ago, I'm not sure, and there it said, go to Hawaii. And guess what? When I had gone to Hawaii, it said, go to New York. And I'm like, when you're in New York, you are tempted, you should go to Hawaii. That is where there is happiness. Whereas those who are in Hawaii, they want to go to New York because they think New York, there is happiness, right? But this is a material world, and our constitutional position is not here in this material world. It is in the spiritual world. That is where we belong. So Bhagavad Gita is giving us a simple process. In fact, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj is, giving us the 9 processes: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. These are the 9 processes of devotional service. The first one to start with is hearing, Shravanam. When we hear, when we hear again and again this Bhagavad Gita, then there should be, if we are really hearing it sincerely, we should develop a desire to do kirtanam, which is chanting. When we chant, then there is smaranam, then there is remembrance of the Supreme Lord. So hearing, chanting, and then there's remembrance. And when the remembrance comes, then the other processes of devotional service follow automatically. Just like I'm hungry. If I eat, automatically the hunger is satisfied. I'm not hungry anymore. So similarly, when we take on this knowledge, when we follow the process, and here in today's 3 verses we learned, it's important to perform unalloyed devotional service. There should not be any mixture. Unfortunately, most people are, looking for a business deal with the Lord. Okay, Lord, I'm going to do this, you do this for me in return. No, we're not looking for a business deal. The relationship between us and the Supreme Lord should be that of love. And in love, there are no conditions. So, Bhagavad Gita, very nicely, step by step, excuse me, step by step, is giving us the understanding that how we can make the best use of the bad bargain that we have in this material world. So somehow or the other, if we can understand and put it into practice, then we can be happy even while we are in this material world, in this material body. So I'm going to stop here. If anyone has any questions,